All right, let's move into something that I don't think Warren would have invested in this airline, Spirit Airlines. Spirit, they've began liquidation this morning with all 17,000 jobs gone effective immediately, and a $500 million Trump bailout that died on the vine due to creditor opposition. The cause is clearly fuel. The Iran war doubled jet fuel prices, and Spirit's model couldn't survive it. This will be the third time since late 2024 that Spirit has filed for bankruptcy. Very interesting stat there. Frontier and Avelo have joined forces and formed a coalition, and they'll be lining up for a $2.5 billion bailout of their own from the federal government. Michael, is the ultra low-cost carrier model just dead in any environment with geopolitical fuel price tail risk? Or does Spirit's particular cost structure get caught while the model still works for someone more disciplined?
I think to answer that question, let's play Warren Buffett. Let's put in our own system profit. Let's go in system prompt. Let's go into the fundamentals. You said during that the cause was fuel prices. That's probably one cause, but then the question would be upstream. Why would fuel prices cause that business model to collapse? And it had collapsed multiple times in the past. They have multiple bankruptcies. So then your question is, what is it about Spirit Airlines that makes them not able to survive? And then if the implication was this is just an industry problem for the business model of low-cost airlines, so a cost leadership position, then what you want to do is look at other cost leadership airlines out there like Ryanair. Are they having the same problems? And one of my favorite cases out there, it was written by Charles O'Reilly, I believe. He looks at Continental Light. Now, I don't know if you remember Continental, but Continental was basically a luxury airline, maybe not Emirates level, but it went the international routes, the luxury routes, the expensive routes, and then Southwest came in and positioned itself against them by being like the fox. So Continental was the lion, big fat lion, luxury, and then Southwest said, we'll intentionally go away from you, take these regional routes, be an operational monster. Continental, for some reason, even though they weren't even flying those routes, perceived them as competition. This is one of my big criticisms of corporate executives and market shares. It really depends on how you define the market. So in their heads, every airline was a competitor because they're in the same market. I think the way you should think about markets is it depends on the customer problem, the customer segmentation. If you're serving completely different segments, you could argue you're in different markets, that the share is irrelevant. You're maybe polluting the share by including people who aren't actually competing against you. So you could imagine a cluster of like Ryanair, Southwest in one corner, and then maybe at the top right, like Emirates and United and Lufthansa and all these, super luxury, maybe they're not all super luxury, but, premium airlines. So this brilliant Continental executive decided we need to combat Southwest. They're stealing share from us. Created something called Continental Light, which was a competitor inside of a premium airline for Southwest. What happened, and this often happens when you try to be both a cost leader and a premium play, you bleed. And you bleed because you have to carry the cost of the luxury brand. You also bleed because you're not able to be as operationally efficient as your competitors because you don't have that operational culture. Maybe you could learn it over time, but it's very difficult to do both. Let's just say it that way. It's not that it's impossible. It's just very difficult to do both. So what you want to do is take that context of different types of positioning you can take in the airline industry and say, what was Spirit Airlines doing? Were they a pure cost leadership play, or were they dipping into the other space where it made it very difficult to compete? And there are other data points out there you might want to look at. I think Delta, for example, has unleashed the basic prices, right? Even more basic than economy. And then, Ryanair, I don't know are you familiar with it?
Never flown them. I've heard of them.
But it's a similar thing where you can fly from like London to Madrid for $30.
Yeah.
And my joke was always, it's one of these price discrimination models where you come in with a bare minimum cost. So you get on, if you want to check in, there's 20 more bucks. If you want a seat, 30 more bucks, right? If you want a seat belt, 40 more bucks. If you want oxygen, yeah, you're gonna have to pay for that too, right? So that's that model. And what it does is say like, hey, if you're just doing a day trip to from London to Madrid and back, pay 40 bucks. But if you're bringing luggage and everything else, you're going to have to pay for that. I think we have similar airlines in the United States that do that, and people
Hmm.
aren't happy with that.
Yeah.
Obviously, when that happens, it's a surprise when you get to the airport. That's a big context to think about. And this is why I get annoyed by the news and headlines because they say the cause is fuel prices. It looks that way, but why then are others not folding that are presumably low cost airlines? So you have to actually go into the fundamentals of the industry, the segmentation, the strategies that different airlines deploy, and try to figure out. And I'm not an expert on Spirit, but this is how I would approach it. What are they
Well,
doing?
so, let's go back to Warren Buffett again. He has at least he's attributed with a famous quote of saying, when the tide goes out, you're going to see who's swimming naked. So,
Yes,
meaning if you don't have the proper emergency fund, cash on hand,
bailouts,
bailouts,
COVID.
if you haven't been handling your business correctly and responsibly in good times, then when the bad times come, you're going to have to pay the consequences. And that's, I think, what's happened to Spirit here. Yeah, I agree with you. Fuel might have been just one straw on the camel's back.
The final catalyst, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But it wasn't what led to the entire demise. I think you're absolutely correct there. In fact, I have a quote from Sean Duffy, who's the Department of Transportation Secretary. And he said that Spirit was in dire straits long before the war with Iran. And that's an interesting thing for him to say just because he's, he also has the need to keep the segment alive, because if the entire segment were to die, there would be a huge influx of demand and it would kind of throw the market completely off and the prices would just keep skyrocketing and skyrocketing and it would be a big issue. So he needs to keep the market alive. So it's a really interesting thing for him to say. But I bet it's founded.
Well, and the Washington bureaucrats don't want to have to ride with the plebes back in economy. So
What do you
they need
mean?
to have,
Biden rides Amtrak every day.
yeah, right. Right.
So could you explain this to me a little bit? So the holdouts on the deal, the government and Donald Trump, we offered a bailout deal to Spirit Airlines, and it was turned down by the bondholders, which are listed as Citadel, which is Ken Griffin's firm, Ares, and Cyrus Capital as the large three bondholders. Why would they turn something like that down?
Well, look at the priors in this case. So, what is the probability if you've already been bankrupt? How many times? Three times?
Two times before this, yeah.
Two times that you'll be bankrupt a third time. So there's already something about the Spirit Airlines business model that would make you think that, yeah, it's not just fuel prices. There's just something fundamentally flawed with this model, and we better get out while we can. Now, why would the debt holders do that? Because they have priority when it comes to liquidation over equity holders. So you want to make sure that you get yours first, that you get the assets, the cash, whatever's left over before anybody else. And what I don't know, because I've never was in such a situation because I did venture capital, what I don't know is if the government, if it comes in with a bailout, if it becomes first rank when it comes to liquidation. I assume,
Yeah. Yeah, that
well, I
was.
don't want to assume. I think that would be an open question you look at.
Well,
Why
DJT
they
said
might have.
America comes first in this case. It was actually a quote. So, yeah,
Well,
I
you
think that was
can,
part of the deal.
it helps if you're the referee and the court and the lawmaker.
Yeah.
So you can kind of game the rules. But if that's the case, you can imagine as a credit holder, you're like, oh, well, hell, they're putting in 500 billion. I'm going to move down the totem pole
Yeah.
when it comes to liquidation. You better pull the trigger,
Yeah.
right?
That makes
And,
sense.
it's unfortunate for employees. And I think people are stranded. They basically just like shut down operations immediately because that burns cash, of course. They don't want to burn more of their cash. Um, but that's the way the game works. That's the risk that you take when you enter a really, really difficult industry.
Yeah.
You
I,
know, I'm always looking for entrepreneurial ideas.
mhm.
Two ones that never cross my mind, restaurants, including bars and airlines.
Hmm.
I just don't know why you would start. The barriers to entry in one are really low, restaurants, but the competition, therefore, is really intense. The barriers to entry for airlines are huge. You got capital expenses up front to get the aircraft, and then you got to get your gates. You have to have deals with the airports. Probably have to lobby people for that. I don't even know how that works. That's a hell of a lot of expenses. So very difficult industries for different reasons. But once you're in, even though there are heavy capital barriers, right? It's a bloody
Yeah.
red ocean.
Would you consider? I mean, restaurants. I think would be. Would airlines? Would those both be consumption-based businesses? So, like supplements, they're consumption-based. So you continually buy these things over and over. After you've consumed them, they're gone. You need to buy more. M&Ms, consumption. You don't
Yeah.
just go buy one iPod and you're done. You buy a lot
Well,
of packets of M&Ms.
I think where the analogy holds is, especially in the business crowd or consumer based, I think what you'd say is we talked about it when we were talking about Five Guys. You have your casual, then you
Mm-hmm.
have your fast casual, and then you have your fast food, and then you have premium.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could segment the airlines in a similar fashion, except with restaurants, your substitution is eating at home, right? With airlines, you have a lot more options to substitute depending on your route, right? But if it's local, let's say I fly from Raleigh, North Carolina to Washington, I could drive, I could take a train, I could take a bus.
Yeah.
And what you look for is are people trading down? So that analogy holds. Do they trade down from, oh, I can't take Lufthansa to Germany. I'm going to take, and I definitely can't take business class. I'm going to be taking the basic on, even Delta's too expensive. I'm going to take basic somewhere. Maybe I'm going to fly up on a route to, I don't know, Reykjavik and then around and then down and somehow get there. So you do see that behavior. It's very similar. So it's price conscious customers, and when you're being squeezed across the board on prices in the economy, that's why fuel prices would cause a problem, is that it exposes people who are already price sensitive for low cost airlines, they're even more exposed. You would presume, right? So how are they trading down? Maybe they're just not traveling. Maybe
Yeah.
they put that trip off. And even in business, this happens a lot. I'm sure you've seen it. You freeze business travel. Well, the way it works in business is first of the year you get in all your travel because around Q3, travel gets frozen every single year, basically, right? So watch your travel. And then people will start doing Zoom, Teams calls or driving, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you can see the analogy between those. They're consumer facing and you get the same price pressures and you get the similar behavior of trading down. Yeah, of course.
Interesting. Anything else on Spirit before we? I think that's the last topic. All right.
Man, I get it is the last topic, and I think the thing I always wonder in airlines is you don't see very much innovation.
Yeah.
It's rare to see real innovation in airlines. Like, how many different ways can we experiment with getting on the plane? No matter how you do it, it's awful. And part of that has to do with like the status people are selling, those premium airlines, the miles you're racking up, especially as a corporate traveler, that you get to privatize, right? So I just don't see much innovation around there. It's more on that side, like loyalty, benefits, rewards. I suppose it might be a technical thing too. You're not allowed to create those supersonic jets, at least yet. I know there's some experimentation in that direction. On fuel, I know we were looking at it as well in some of my past companies. Will there be innovation around electric planes?
Yeah.
Different types of fuel, maybe? The thing is, though, airlines and aircraft have been optimized for the regulatory environment, and they are super safe. It's slower and safer. So I think people are just reluctant, like the FAA, to allow innovation. So That's something I've always had my eye on, though, is why is there no innovation there? And it's because that environment's very difficult.
Yeah, there have been innovations in the private flying market. So, I've seen things from, the cars that turn into planes, that type of thing, to all electric. It does exist out there. I don't know the range or anything like that, but I think that's probably where we would see the innovations start and then work their way up. But you're right. I mean, when I think back of airlines in my entire life, it's pretty much been the same. I don't have to dress up anymore when I go on the flight. Maybe the way we get on the plane's a little bit different, but all in all,
I'm
it's the
always
same thing.
amazed. I'm always amazed by people who do an 8-hour international flight in a suit.
Yeah.
You can change when you land. So it's incredible to me. I'm still waiting on the hoverboard. It was
No.
promised in Back to the Future.
Yeah.
I know there are some LAG clips where he was pitching hoverboards as his startup idea. I'm still waiting for flying cars and hoverboards.
Well,
So let's see.
you can keep waiting on that. I think there's been some stabs at it, but I don't know. I don't know. That's you let me know when that does come out. I'd love to watch you ride one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
If it can hold me, if it can hold me. Yeah.
All right. Hey, you've just watched a clip from Show Your Priors podcast. Check out our main channel for full episodes. We have a new one every Tuesday. If you liked what you saw, give us a like and subscribe. It's free for you and helps us out a ton. Did we miss something during our discussions? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks, and we'll see you on the next one.